Are we going to have a recession? When's it going to happen? I've been waiting for it for the last 2 years. Well, in this episode, we're going to unpack some things to really wrap your mind around how we should be thinking about recession or not recession, and whether or not that should really make a change in our day to day lives. And as you could imagine, we're going to talk about the impacts for Tesla and the impacts for TSLA. Now, before we get into it, who am I? My name's Nicholas. This is Investing Against the Grain. If you're new, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, do all that good stuff. Help me out. Trying to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Should be doable. I'm putting out more and more content, so here's a good reason for you to subscribe. Also, keep in mind, we are 2 days away from Tesla earnings. Really, we're like 2 sleeps away from Tesla earnings. On Wednesday, we're going to be having our mega live stream. I'll be putting out a link for it. We're going to have everybody. Herbert's going to be on there. Farzad's going to be on there. Tesla Boomer Mama, Yashu, Matt, Emmett, all your favorite people are going to be on there. So make sure you tune in for that. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a blast. And we can either cry or cheer all together. Either way, bring your drinks, bring your excitement, bring your good questions, and we're going to have a party. All right. So let's get things kicked off here. So are we going to have a recession or not? Listen, we've been sitting here for the last 2 years, constantly having all these pundits predict if we're going to have a recession, we're not going to have a recession. And all we hear are the people who say we're going to have a recession. They keep pushing it off, saying, "Oh, it's going to come. It's going to come. It's going to come. It's just going to be further down, further. Oh, the consumer's so strong. Oh, everybody just still has a lot of COVID stimulus checks, right?" We hear all that, and it's like, all right, man. Like, do you know anything? Or do you not know anything? The people who say that we're not going to have a recession, well, they're the ones that are saying, like, well, actually, the consumer is really strong. Things aren't that bad. Inflation's coming down. Who's right? Who's right? And did we have a recession already? I mean, whatever happened to 2 consecutive negative quarters, right? Whatever happened to that? I mean, last I checked, that was the definition of a recession. And then all of a sudden, this last time, we reimagined, reconceptualized what a recession was. So let's take a look. What's the street saying right now? What are the headlines out there talking about? Well, let's take a look. So let's see. If we Google, and this is the latest news, let's see. One day ago, Wall Street Journal, a recession is no longer the consensus. That's Wall Street Journal. Okay. Business Insider, stock market crash. 3 reasons the next recession is still coming. Okay, so there is a recession. All right. Then Bazinga, no recession. Economists are now predicting brighter days ahead. New survey. How are we supposed to make sense of anything when this is the back and forth? All right. The one thing that I want you to take away from this, and really this should really set the tone for everything else we're going to talk, moving forward. Nobody knows. Nobody has the answer. Anybody who tells you they do, they're wrong. They're just trying to get clicks. They're just trying to, I don't know what they're trying to do, but it's nefarious. Nobody knows what's going to happen. If we did, guess what? People would be very wealthy. People would be able to predict things, and they wouldn't tell us, right? Like, you'd be able to get ahead of these things. It's nobody knows. That's the bottom line. Nobody knows. Everybody's guessing. Everybody's taking their special indicator of what is a recession, what's not. Oh, the inverted yield curve, or we have to have X amount of unemployment before we hit a recession, or right. It's all these things that people have seen historically that they think are predictors of the future. And as far as I'm concerned, this is no different than just doing charting analysis. All right. So I don't think that does any good. So why would we be in a recession to begin with? Well, a lot of this has to do with the Fed increasing rates. And, this is probably something you already know. The reason they're increasing rates to slow down the economy. Why? Well, because we have high inflation, yada, yada, yada. You guys know the story. I'm not here to regurgitate it. But what I do want to share with you is, okay, well, where are we on that fight with inflation? And does that maybe mean that, depending how that's going, if we can tell if we're going to have a recession or not? Well, great question. So let's take a quick look. Okay, so here's trueflation, and we have CPI, right? But the problem with the CPI is that it's looking backwards. It's a lagging indicator. PCE, same problem. PPI, all these metrics that the Fed supposedly uses for being data driven. These are all looking backward signals, right? And at that point, you're really no better than all the people saying, oh, well, the yield curves are inverted. That means recession. Or, oh, well, we have to increase unemployment by 1% to get into a recession, right? You're doing the same thing, albeit in a shorter time span, right? Because you're looking backwards 1 year rather than looking historically and trying to make decisions based off that. But the point is, with Trueflation here, you can look this up. You can go to trueflation.com. It's free. You can look up their methodology. But essentially, what their charter is to try and figure out what inflation is true on that day, right? Not looking backwards, not trying to aggregate, not trying to do some Mickey Mouse math. They're trying to find it on a day-to-day basis, which it's crazy that the government doesn't do this. It's not that hard. It is not that hard. It's not. There's no technological um, it issue that would keep us from doing this as a society and as a government. Anyways, looking at Trueflation here, which has been a pretty good predictor of about being ahead of things about like 3 months, and I can kind of show you here. Let's see, what was our last one, like 3.7? Let's see, 3.7. Okay, so obviously we know we dropped down to 3, so let's go off that. So okay, so we're at about 3%, like around May, right? May, June, July, uh, August, if you want to count that, right? This is May 23rd. So I would say now we're probably about 5, 6 months off from what it currently is. Because right now we went down to 3. Now we're back up to we went to 3.33, then 3.6, and 3.7. So it's almost like inflation's resurging. But there's some outliers there because a lot of that's coming from energy. A lot of that is coming from the way the CPI or the way they calculate inflation for housing through the CPI, which isn't on a month-to-month basis or quarter-to-quarter basis. Instead, they do a weird like 6-month staggering. So they'll take like January and August and aggregate those. February and September, aggregate those. And it's weird how they do that. But Trueflation doesn't do that. Trueflation tries to look at things on a day-to-day basis. And so you have the most up-to-date estimation for inflation. And you can see that we've been down in the 2% for quite some time. And so I think this is a great leading indicator. You can see over here, hopefully this isn't too small for you, but you can see over here that we did have a little bit of a jump to 2.7. But since then, we've come back down to 2.3. So this is telling us that, okay, well, if we're going to go into a recession because the Fed's increasing rates and the Fed's increasing rates because of inflation, okay, so the whole point of doing that is to slow the economy. We get that. Trueflation is a good signal here for us, right? Signal noise ratio. We want more signal. It's a good signal for what might be happening, that we might be actually down at the 2% level. And if that's the case, maybe the Fed can stop raising rates. And if the Fed can stop raising rates, well, maybe we can have a soft landing and avoid a recession. And then all those articles saying that we have sunnier days and we're going to, avoid a recession could be right. That's possible. But let's take a look at what we think the Fed is doing, right? Let me actually make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. You guys don't only see that much of me. So this is Nick T. Nick T has become the Fed whisperer, as they say. Essentially, for some reason, they've chosen him to leak out certain information so that then it can get out into the public, so that then everybody kind of knows what's going to happen ahead of time, right? Yeah, we don't have a corrupt government. It's all on the up and up, right? Anyways, so Nick T says here, most economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal, and ironically enough, right, we come back over here, Wall Street Journal over here saying a recession is no longer the consensus, right? So at least that's consistent. Most economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal think the Fed has made its last rate hike and will have lowered rates by next June. The probability of a recession in the US has dipped below 50% for the first time in a year, according to the survey. Okay, so that's good, right? I mean, Nick T, the Fed whisperer, the person who hears everything from the Fed, is essentially okay. So he's using this survey, but I imagine he also has some type of inside scoop or talking to people. But either way, this is essentially saying that we think we're going to avoid recession and that the Fed's done raising rates. So that could be a good thing. That could be a good sign that we're going to avoid recession. But Here's the thing. We got lagging effects. And I think we don't see a lot of this come through, and we're gonna have to deal with this, right? It take like Milton Friedman, famously said that interest rate hikes work with varied and lag effects. And so the question is, does that still hold true today? If that's so, if it does hold true today, have we experienced all the lag effects yet? How much have we experienced? Have we only experienced 1% of the increase of 5.5% that they've done? Have we experienced 4% of it? Right? We don't know where we're at. So that definitely puts, a big question mark in the air. Okay. So then if we take a look at, some, layoffs, right? Layoffs are a big deal. We saw huge layoffs, right? Or excuse me, not last year, this year. Well, this year and last year, right? Even Tesla did some layoffs last year. We saw Tesla do layoffs. We've seen Meta do layoffs. We've seen Amazon do layoffs. We've seen Microsoft do layoffs. We've seen Google do layoffs, right? Essentially, the tech industry took the brunt of it. Well, here we go again. We're starting to see more layoffs yet again. If I share my screen, you're going to see here Microsoft owned LinkedIn lays off nearly 700 employees. Read the memo here. But isn't that ironic? LinkedIn is laying off 700 people. And it's not just the tech companies, right? Now we're seeing what's happening with Ford. Ford has laid off an entire, it was like 700 people, entire line from the F-150 Lightning, right? Literally one of their only EV brands that they have right now, or automobiles. And the reason for that is, well, one, they've got inventory buildup, but two, this UAW strike isn't helping. And so we're starting to see a lot of these lagged effects. Now, I think some of this stuff could have happened either way, with or without the UAW strike, because these automakers have such big buildup in the lots. Now, don't worry, I'm not here to pick on Ford or GM or any of that. It's not that kind of episode, and I am going to get to Tesla, so bear with me. But my point is, we're going to see more and more layoffs. So, are we going to have a recession, or are we not going to have a recession? Well, I don't know. Nobody knows. But I would say that the one argument or idea that I've heard that I think resonates the most comes from Kathy Woods. Now, I don't think Kathy Woods is absolutely amazing the way a lot of people think she is. I like her. Her ARK Invest is headquartered here where I live in St. Pete. But she I feel like she really got her notoriety, at least popularity, from Tesla, her Tesla calls. And I do obviously like her Tesla investment thesis. I love the work Tasha Kinney has done. But I think that Kathy Woods has a better feel and pulse for what's going on with the economy and monetary policy than she does from stock picking. Besides Tesla, of course, which she barely even owns much of it, anyways. But anyway, so here we have, according to Kathy Woods, the current economic situation can be described as a rolling recession, with various sectors experiencing consecutive negative growth. Quote, the rest of the world is experiencing much more pain than we are, with China, Europe, and other regions potentially in something worse than a recession. So this is very interesting, right? Especially when you start to think about it. And this, I think this explains, or is the most accurate way to explain what we've been going through. I think tech has had the recession, and in many ways, they're still going to continue to have a recession, maybe like an earnings recession. And that's because a lot of tech is B2B, right? Unless you're talking about like Facebook or heavy ad businesses, which even then still, right? It's still gonna weigh on them because a lot of that is B2B. So I think tech will have an earnings recession potentially, but I think they've had the brunt of their rolling recession. Now it's starting to go from tech, definitely going into autos. And we're going to continue to see this going from sector to sector. We're seeing in the housing market right now, right? Housing market is in a depression as far as I can tell. There's no supply, there's no buyers, interest rates are through the roof. I mean, the best way to think about this is, if you bought $1 million house, I'm just saying million because it's easy numbers, $1 million house, call it 2 years, a year and a half ago, right? Before they started doing this crazy rate hikes, year and a half ago, you would have been paying about $4,200 a month for $1 million house. Today, that same $1 million house costs you about $7,500 a month. That's about a 50% uptick in that $1 million house, right? So now you take that and you see that difference and you work your way down the line to, a $500,000 house, a $250,000 house. Now people essentially need to pay 50% more for the same amount of house. That's ridiculous. With that, nobody's gonna be selling their house, which means there's not gonna be nothing. There's gonna be no added supply other than what the builders are doing. And even then, the builders, the top five builders, have essentially composed a letter to the Fed to say, yo, stop it. Stop it. You're screwing everything up. You're really, really hurting the housing market. So even the home builders, who you would think would be like, hell yeah, nobody else is putting new supply on. Everyone's going to want to buy new because it's going to be the only choice. They're saying, hey, Fed, you got to cut it with these rate hikes. So I think housing's in a recession. I think tech had their recession. Maybe they're still going through it. You're going to start seeing it in the autos, right? It's going to keep going. It's going to make its way through. But I think this idea of a rolling recession will keep us from having a true recession, right? And this will allow us to get into a soft landing, if you will. And all that means is essentially we don't fall into a recession. Now, if you want my honest opinion, I think we've been in a recession. I think we went into a recession when we had two negative quarters back in was it this past summer or last summer? Either way, I think that's when we had a recession, and I think we've been in a recession since. So what does this mean for Tesla? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all here for. I know about 17 minutes in, I'm just now getting to this. But hey, we're here not for a quick sound clips or for TikTok type content. If you want that quick dopamine, short attention span stuff, well, there's other places for that. So what does that mean for Tesla? Well, let's think about Tesla. First of all, right now they're viewed as a auto company. I know. They're not an auto company, they're energy, they're FSD, they're tech, all that. I get that. You don't need to explain that to me. But the market, for the most part, views them as an auto company. Although that is starting to shift. Mark my words, the majority of the questions that get asked during earnings call on Wednesday are going to be around AI, related around AI and Cybertruck. Maybe the Model 3, the refresh. But mark my words, Tesla is starting to not be viewed as just an auto company. But for the most part, it is right now. So let's live in that paradigm for a moment. Now, high interest rates aren't just bad for houses, they're bad for any big loan. And guess what? Automobiles are a big loan for a lot of people. As a result, you have seen Tesla cut prices for their vehicles so that they can move their inventory. Essentially, Tesla, Elon he told us this on a Spaces last year, summer 2022. He told us, we will essentially drop the prices and sacrifice margin for whatever the clearing price is to clear our inventory. We do not want to have inventory. If we need to drop prices, sacrifice margin, we are going to sell cars. We're going to push them out. We're not just going to build inventory and just keep prices artificially high just so that we can have some great margin story. Not what they're going to do. Not the name of the game. They're thinking bigger. They're thinking FSD. They're thinking long term. And you need to get in that, your mindset wrapped around that sooner than later, or it's going to be a tough next 12 months for you. I promise you that. Prices will probably continue to come down if demand doesn't pick up. Now, Tesla is going to be okay with this because they have lots of pricing power. They have lots of room to go, lots of margin that they can sacrifice. These other automakers are not in that same camp. In fact, they're hurting. That's one of the reasons why the F-150 Lightning is essentially getting reduced line operations. CNBC just did a whole documentary about why demand for EVs are dying. And the truth is, no, demand for EVs aren't dying. Demand for EVs that aren't Teslas are dying. And why is that? Well, there's lots of reasons, right? Whether it's the supercharging network, whether it's just the reliability of it. A lot of it is cost. I would say the majority of it is probably cost at this point. And if you could get a Tesla over something else, why wouldn't you? Especially if it's cheaper. And then don't forget with the IRA credits. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And so I think with the IRA credits, recognition of more FSD revenue, with energy ramping up, with the 4680 battery, COGS reduction, Tesla's in a very strong position heading into a potential recession. Notably, as well, they have no debt. They've got about 23 billion cash on hand. They are in a very, very beautiful spot compared to all the other OEMs. So, are we in a recession? Or are we not in a recession? Like, what would you just waste all this time for on here if I don't have an answer for you? Well, I don't. I really don't, because I'm not going to lie to you. What I can tell you though is that I think we are probably headed for a tough next 6 to 12 months. We've been in a tough 24 months, 2 years. We'll probably have at least another year. What I anticipate happening is that as we get into this time next year and as we roll up into the elections, we're going to see gas prices probably come down. We're going to see interest rates come down. We're going to see listen, this is how you know things are corrupt. Every election cycle, like clockwork, somehow the economy starts to do good, right? One way or another, things tend to look better going into an election. And it's just the way it is. And so as much as the Fed tries to say they're not politicized, I think there'll be pressure on Jerome Powell to cut rates. I don't think it'll happen until the second half of 2024, but it will happen. I think the Fed's done. I think inflation is more or less dead. I think the lag numbers that we see looking backwards, those may be sticky and take time to work through the system. But I think we're at a true like 2.5% of inflation. That's what I believe. Do your own homework. Don't trust what I'm saying. With Tesla, I think Tesla as a company is stronger than ever. I think the whatever metric you want to use for Tesla, it's stronger than ever. The stock, listen, I believe that you should be prepared for Wednesday, Thursday, for the rest of this week to potentially see the stock go down $50, $60. Why? Because Wall Street's irrational. And because inevitably Elon says something on the call or a guidance is given that Wall Street just doesn't like. Now, with all that, there's a lot of negative sentiment right now out there for Tesla stock. And honestly, that could turn out to be a very big positive. We could see a lot of green out of this. I mean, just imagine if margins aren't as low as we thought they were. Imagine if they announced Cybertruck. Imagine if they announced a huge production increase with 4680 batteries, which they did. Imagine if they tell us about FSD12 or Optimus is working on lines already. There's lots of things, lots of levers that Tesla could pull. Buybacks, right? There's a whole debate right now going on about whether or not they should do buybacks. Tesla's in a strong position. Tesla will be fine. These other OEMs, I'm not sure. The rest of the market, I'm not sure. But I do think inflation's dead. I do think the Fed's done. I do think we're going to start seeing some cuts next year. And I do think there's a reason to have a little hopium. After all, if you're always going to be upset and negative, what's the point? All right, we're going to leave it there. Again, do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, help us get to 10,000. I love you all. Thanks for watching. Peace.